Welcome back. All right, so the third to last power rankings of the year. Well, let's see. So we have one next week, one the week after, and then the week after that. So this is the fourth. It's because 3 weeks from today, I will be posting the power rankings the day after the regular season is done, and that'll be the last power rankings of the season. Looking forward to that. Now, there's some movement on this week's power rankings. There were some teams that were in the top row that did not have a great week, and there were some teams that had great weeks. So, yeah, there's been absolutely some movement. So let's go ahead and get into it. Starting with the row where there wasn't a lot of movement. Number 32 this week, same as last week, it's Arizona. The Coyotes are playing out the string. What I get a kick out of when I watch the Arizona broadcast, of course, is that Tyson Nash is still selling this idea that, hey, you go out there, you play every game, you try your hardest. And they are, but they're overwhelmed. Against Vegas, against Vancouver. It's clear that this is a team that had already been stripped down to bare bones, and right now it's even worse. The loss of Clayton Keller takes away their absolute number one beast offensively, and of course Chychrun's been out too, so it's not the same team as the one that started the season that we thought was going to be really bad, and so here we are. Number 31, same spot as last week, New Jersey. Now, they beat Dallas today, which is why they're not 32. They were actually 32 at one point this week. That loss against Montreal, that win against Dallas definitely hurt Dallas's standing on this board this week. But for New Jersey, I still have them in 31st place. So no movement in the bottom two. They stay the same. Number 30 also does not change. It's Philadelphia. It's that time of year, right, where the teams kind of end up in the same spots week beyond week. I think there's 9 teams that stay in the same spot as they were last week. Philadelphia, one of them, and again, these bottom 3, they're kind of entrenched there. Philadelphia loses tonight, of course, against Anaheim, which was to decide who was going to be 29th. So dropping 2 spots from last week is Anaheim, who got a win tonight over Philadelphia. And again, with Anaheim, they're playing out the string. Their season's done, and it's over. The deadline, of course, you move out Raquel, you move out Lindholm, you've signaled that you're done for the year, and that's kind of how this has worked out. So these bottom 4 teams likely stay in the bottom 4, I would think, till the end of the season, but we'll see, because number 28 also dropping 2 spots from last week, the Chicago Blackhawks. The shutout loss at home against Seattle was a big reason why they end up 28th on the board. And so I had to switch things around a little bit when that result took place. And Chicago, same thing. They moved out. Fleury was winning them some games. And so when they traded him out, you could see what was going to happen. And not that it's on Lankinen, because I think Lankinen's played well since the deadline. But Chicago, just in general, it's been this rough overall season. I think fans are going to be glad in Chicago to see it done and over with and in the rearview mirror. Although the uncertainty for next year is still there, at least I think there's still uncertainty with what's going to happen next year. Number 27, moving up 2 spots from last week, Seattle. See? So Seattle was at the bottom of this board not that long ago. Now they're almost out of the bottom row. I don't think they get out of the bottom row, but at least they've won 5 of their last 11. They're competitive. They're going out. They're giving it their all. And they're winning the occasional game. So Seattle's played well enough to pull themselves out of this area here and up to this area. I don't know that they end up in the next row before the season's over. They could, though. And for Seattle, it's been a rough year. It really has. But they've got some extra draft picks going to this draft. You're going to have Matty Beniers in this lineup probably sooner rather than later. And I think things are going to get better. Seattle, if they win the draft lottery and they get Shane Wright, if you add Shane Wright and Matty Beniers to this team, they're going to be exciting starting next year. There won't be a playoff team necessarily unless Ron Francis pulls off some miracle in the offseason with his player moves, but they should be better. Number 26, moving up 2 spots from last week as well as Ottawa. So, of course, Ottawa had a rough night tonight, but that was against Shesterkin and the Rangers, who were looking to clinch, and they did. And Ottawa's been keeping things competitive too, much like Seattle. They're staying in games. They're winning a couple of games here and there. They're winning enough that, again, I have them ahead of these teams, but they're not quite in the next row. So for Ottawa, they're playing out the string. A lot of young players coming up for them, and we'll see how next year treats them, and they may end up winning the draft lottery too. And if they win the draft lottery and get Shane Wright, I think they'll be pretty happy with their attack next year. Josh Norris has been fantastic. I just want to throw that in there. Number 25, and they dropped 2 spots from last week, the Montreal Canadiens. So Montreal, rough week for them overall. They did get the win over New Jersey, but yeah, it's a rough week overall. But again, Cole Caulfield looks like what he was supposed to be at the start of the year. And if Caulfield had played the entire year the way he has since Marty St. Louis took over, I think he would have won the Calder. So that was my pick before the season started, and at least he's salvaged it since St. Louis took over, so it doesn't make my prediction look as bad. Although in the end, it's still probably going to be Raymond. It could be Zegras. And of course, I don't want to forget Seider, so I'm not going to. And there are others that you can throw into the mix as well. There are a lot of players that could be considered and should be considered for the Calder this year. It's a pretty good class. But yeah, so Montreal ends up 25th. Number 24, moving up 1 spot from last week, is Detroit. So Detroit, they have an overtime loss tonight against Columbus, and some frustration in that loss for them. Some pride kicking in. They've won the occasional game here and there. They're allowing far too many goals most of their games, and then other games against Boston, Vancouver. I've noticed these things against Winnipeg, which didn't make my wife happy. They seem to get the goaltending they need, so she wasn't happy. After that game, she was like, seriously? And I said, yeah, I know. Detroit does this to our teams, so we could share this mutual feeling of the pain of Detroit coming out with a really good game and then not a good game the next game when they're against a team we don't care whether they beat or not. Number 23, also moving up 1 spot from last week, is San Jose. So San Jose and Detroit both move up 1 spot because of Montreal dropping a couple of spots. So really, in essence, Montreal moves down and it allows them to move up. Not a whole lot takes place this week that changes my opinion on either San Jose or Detroit. San Jose loses tonight as well. Spirited effort for them against the Canucks. I thought Demko played really well, and so San Jose didn't have any playoff spot to be playing for. The Canucks still technically have a chance of making the playoffs. I heard on Hockey Night in Canada them talking it up. I don't think it happens, but for San Jose, I think that's a big part of the reason why they end up on the losing end tonight, because they just don't have something to play for. Number 22, same spot as last week, Columbus. They like being 22. Isn't that the spot that Detroit got stuck in for a while? I'm looking forward to, not just in 3 weeks when it's the last power rankings and then we can pack her up, and then I do one during the summer. I do one going into the season as well, which always makes people angry. But Columbus, it feels like, has kind of stayed in the same spot, and so I'm gonna get a kick out of looking at the power rankings when they're all done and see which teams moved where. So I don't really pay that much attention to the overall picture just from week to week. So Columbus stays in the same spot. Number 21, and dropping 1 spot from last week, Buffalo. Buffalo's staying competitive. They've had some pretty tough challenges, and they scored themselves a win over Carolina. So Buffalo, a couple of setbacks, but they got themselves victory. And again, it's about next season. They've got Owen Power coming in. Can't wait to see his debut on Tuesday against the Toronto Maple Leafs, if that is in fact the date that he comes in. That's going to be a busy night for me, but because of the fact that we are often seeing games now between 2 teams that are outside the playoffs, it's not as hard for me to track as it was earlier in the season where I was trying to follow every game equally. So now I don't think people get mad if I'm not following the games as much where it's 2 teams that are going to miss the playoffs. So if I have to drop a game, that's the one I drop first. All right, number 20, dropping 2 spots from last week, the Winnipeg Jets. The Jets, it's been tough to watch. It really has. They got themselves into the conversation. They were playing really well, and then it kind of falls apart. The effort against Detroit, not fantastic. They had the comeback against Colorado, couldn't finish it out, couldn't close it out. And so with Winnipeg, they're kind of spinning their wheels. It feels like they're outside of the playoff picture now. The Vancouver's played themselves into it, and Winnipeg's played themselves out of it, which I didn't see coming as recently as last week, where I had Winnipeg at 18 and I had Vancouver at 21. But here we are, a week later. Winnipeg's 20. Vancouver hasn't shown up on the board yet. Number 19, same spot as last week, the New York Islanders. So, again, the Islanders, really, it's a matter of they're playing better than a lot of these other teams. You could make the argument about Buffalo and New York if you wanted to, but to me, I think New York's still been playing better, despite what happened in that result tonight against St. Louis. And again, St. Louis is something to play for the Islanders? Not really. So I think that's the difference we see there. Which, again, with Arizona and Vegas, that's part of the difference there, too. The Islanders have played well enough that I think they should stay in the same spot this week. The loss against St. Louis notwithstanding, that's kind of a one-off. They've been beating teams that are in playoff spots during their run recently, too. So they look like they're set for a bounce back next season. Is it fool's gold, though? Are we in a situation where the Islanders look like they should be competitive, so you just leave things the same, and then next year they get off to the same kind of start, or something happens and they end up 2-8 out of the gate? Because we've seen that before, where a GM looks at the second half of the season and says, well, we missed the playoffs, but we're close. So you leave it the same, and then the following season, maybe the same thing happens. But again, with the Islanders, we shall see. Number 18, moving up 3 spots from last week, Vancouver. The Canucks, every time I say, all right, so they're dead, that's it, their playoff hopes are done, they have a pretty good week. So I'm going to go ahead and say in this video, their playoff hopes are done, and they're not going to make it. So, I was impressed with their play this week, very much so. And I understand that beating Arizona is not a big deal, but Bo Horvat's playing some of his best hockey. They've been winning games without Quinn Hughes. He was back tonight. They've been winning games without Brock Besser. This is a team that's really come together, and they're playing for each other. They're clearly saying we are still in this until we're officially eliminated, and I'm impressed by that. So they move up to 18 this week, and they may end up as high as 17 next week, because dropping 1 spot from last week is the Dallas Stars. Now, Dallas has games in hand, and we've been talking about this for weeks, but the number of games they have in hand on other teams has dropped. Their standing is not. So they're currently in that last wild card spot by virtue of having games in hand on Vegas. Vegas has more regulation wins than Dallas. So if they end up tied in points, Dallas misses the playoffs. So Dallas has to win games, and that loss against New Jersey is why they're 17th on the board. Again, teams that are top 16 in the standings, the teams that are going to make the playoffs, should be the top half of the board now. That really should be the case for the most part. That was not the case when I used to do the reactive board, and I didn't like that at the time, where a team could go 7-3 like the New York Islanders, maybe they end up 12th or 11th, and I didn't like how that looked. So Dallas is in 17th, even though they're in a playoff spot, because I think Vegas is playing better than they are right now. Number 16, dropping 4 spots from last week and not out of the woods when it comes to being able to get into playoffs, the LA Kings. Now, I did hear the again Hockey Night in Canada guys talking about how Vancouver, well, they could target LA. LA's 6 points clear of them. The 4 points they have to get to bounce past either Dallas or Vegas already seems daunting enough. 6 points when you've got 9 games left. That's a 3-game advantage. So I don't see LA losing enough. But LA, they've fallen on some hard times. And I understand they've gone through a lot of injury problems. There's a lot of young guys in the lineup. And it looks like, they could end up flirting with missing the playoffs. At the very least, they have to worry about Vegas, because if Vegas and Dallas both play really well from here and they both make the playoffs, LA's the one that misses the playoffs now. So the Kings could very well find themselves in the second half of this board as soon as next week, if this week goes the way it could. A lot of games this week, a lot. All right, number 15, moving up 2 spots from last week, the Vegas Golden Knights. Really, Vegas, they've got Pacioretty back now. They've got Leonard back now. I think there should be not necessarily a sigh of relief, but at least a feeling that, okay, now Vegas is in a position where they're going to make it. And I think they will. I know the percentages, last I looked, coming into today's games, the percentages were, it was a 28% chance of Vegas making the playoffs. And I think it was 86% chance for Dallas. I look at these teams and I think Vegas is just playing better. I don't care who Dallas is playing the rest of the way. They lost to New Jersey today. And I don't care who Vegas has left to play either. I think Vegas is outplaying Dallas. And I don't think that the games in hand are that big of a deal, because it means Dallas has more games to play. over the next 3 weeks. They've got, 12 games left? That's a lot of games. So, and with Dallas already looking somewhat tired in some of these games they've been losing, whether that's the reason or not, we'll find out after the season's done. But where players would probably be telling us, hey, we were running on fumes those last couple of weeks. But it looks like Vegas should be able to get in ahead of Dallas. At least at this point, that's how it looks. Number 14, same spot as last week, Nashville. So for the Nashville Predators, they are in a similar position as LA. We really haven't talked about them missing the playoffs in a long time. But mathematically, it's possible. It is absolutely possible that Nashville ends up being a team on the outside looking in. The loss against Florida today, I thought they played well. But again, it's a regulation loss. They don't get a point. So teams behind them were very happy, including the Canucks, who are, I think, 6 points behind them. Again, 6 points ahead. I think that's too much for Vancouver to make up. But we'll see. They have surprised me before. So we'll see if Nashville can turn things around. I think they can. Again, I think they played well against Florida, just it's Florida. Florida's just this machine right now. Number 13, moving up 2 spots from last week, the Washington Capitals. That win over Pittsburgh today, big. That's a big win for them today because it keeps them in the conversation for finishing third. I believe they're 4 points now behind Pittsburgh, and they have games in hand. But they have to be able to keep up this momentum now. And so Ovechkin's at 44 goals. There's a possibility he tries to get to 50. But that's where Washington has to be careful. In seasons past, sometimes the team will focus on getting Ovechkin to a milestone to their own detriment. So they can't do that, and I don't think they will, but it's something to keep an eye on if you're watching Caps games. And at 13, playoff team, absolutely. Their win combined with the Islanders' loss, and yeah, good luck catching them Islanders. I really don't see it happening. All right, number 12, dropping 2 spots from last week, is Tampa. They don't look very Tampa-like, and the loss against Boston is one of those ones, too. Like, they're at home, they need the win, they don't get the win. Right now they're in a wild card spot. It is looking more and more likely that maybe they will be the wild card team. So if you win your division, you might get the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions in round 1. I do not expect Tampa to lose in round 1. I'm just going to say right now, 3 weeks from now, when I'm doing videos, doing previews for the playoff series, I have a funny feeling I'm going to be wearing a Tampa jersey almost no matter who they're playing in the first round, whether it be Florida, whether it be Carolina, maybe it's the Rangers. I think I can't see Tampa losing in the first round. And it's that blind spot that we get from recency bias, which I've talked about many times over. So Tampa Bay, they're 12th, very, very dangerous. Very dangerous. They're not playing great right now. They're still very dangerous. Number 11, dropping 5 spots from last week. This is the biggest drop, too. Yeah, it's the biggest drop. And that's the Pittsburgh Penguins. 4 regulation losses in a row will do that. It definitely drops them out of that top row. And I think there has to be some concerns with Pittsburgh and how things are going to go from here. That 6-3 loss against Washington, got to wake them up. They've got to get it together because, yeah, they are only 4 points ahead of the Capitals. But not only that, they've just been mediocre over the last couple of weeks. And as we get ready for the playoffs, you have to be better than mediocre. So they're close to clinching a playoff spot. We know they're going to make the playoffs. But their frustration with not being able to win a round, which they haven't done since 2018, does that continue in 2022? So that's the storyline. I don't think I'm taking Pittsburgh in the first round no matter who they're against. I've taken Pittsburgh in first rounds and I've been burned too many times. So this time I won't take them in the first round. That way they'll probably win. Right? So should I take them? Anyways. All right. Number 10, moving up 3 spots from last week. They're playing very well. They've got, I think it's 6 wins in a row now, right? It's 5 or 6, and that's the St. Louis Blues. We're going to be hearing when the Saints go marching in the playoffs. I don't know how many times we're going to hear it, but St. Louis looks pretty good right now. They've had some comeback victories. They definitely are capable of comeback victories. Not as much as Florida, not as gaudy as Florida, but they can still do it. And so for St. Louis, pretty big statement win tonight against the New York Islanders. That probably could have been worse than 6-1. It was 6-1 after the second period, so they probably could have made that worse. But St. Louis is clicking on all cylinders right now, and so they move up, and they could very well be in the top row next week if they keep this up. Number 9, same spot as last week, and they're in the same spot in part because they lost against St. Louis. So I debated about whether or not to put Minnesota in 10th and St. Louis in 9th, because there will be Blues fans saying, well, we beat Minnesota. But Minnesota's record has been excellent lately. That was an overtime victory. St. Louis has already moved up 3 spots. To my way of thinking, 3 spots is good. I know how it looks with them being behind Minnesota, but I don't want to drop Minnesota just because the team that's behind them is St. Louis. I don't generally do that with the power rankings. I sometimes will say, like, if Vancouver loses to the Islanders, I might swap them, but I don't necessarily do that every time. I think Minnesota's been playing relatively well. I have some concerns with Minnesota. There's been some cracks showing over the last week or so, but again, we'll see. They do tend to be up and down, but the ups seem to outweigh the downs, so we'll see if that continues this coming week. Number 8, dropping 5 spots from last week. So this team also drops the same amount of spots as Pittsburgh, Carolina. The Hurricanes, I honestly think at this point, I think there's trouble. I do. I feel like this team is trouble. Now, I was asked for my opinion on something earlier this week. I'll throw it into the power rankings here about how they end up killing penalties a lot. I think with Carolina, it's the aggressive style of hockey they play will always cause them to be shorthanded more than they get power plays. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that they play a very aggressive style, and if they stopped being aggressive, I think they would lose more games. That being said, I have some concerns when it comes to Carolina right now. It definitely looks like the Rangers could end up winning the division, which would put Carolina into a matchup with likely Pittsburgh. They likely would beat Pittsburgh in round 1, but can they get further than the second round? And right now, with the way Carolina's been playing, my answer to that would be probably not. Again, the playoffs are a whole different beast. I'm aware. I know. I'm just saying that right now, what we have to go on, Carolina needs to get things together. Number 7, moving up 4 spots from last week. Nice big winning streak for them, the Edmonton Oilers. So the Oilers have been playing very, very well. Kane's been good for them. Draisaitl's been excellent. McDavid's clicking. Their defense has been good, and Koskinen's been fantastic. Now, they lose tonight in a shootout against Colorado. I would be crazy to bust them down because they lost in a shootout against Colorado Avalanche. So, 6-game winning streak, then they lose their next one in a shootout to the best team in the league. I don't have any complaints about that if I'm Edmonton. And so the Oilers end up 7th, and right now it looks like they're going to finish 2nd in that division. And that's going to be a fun race to watch down to the wire, right? Which it looks like it will. It looks like that'll potentially go down to the wire. It would require the Kings to kind of turn things around a little bit from where they've been at, but we'll see. Number 6, moving up 1 spot from last week, the Calgary Flames. So the Flames go out, they sweep California. I think they said that's the first time they've ever swept California, and they beat Seattle. So they win the 4-game road trip. They win every game. Only one of those teams is above the playoff line, but 4 wins in a row is 4 wins in a row. So they pass Carolina this week. Edmonton's right there with them. I think that's great. I think that that's the series we all want to see. Maybe we get that series in the second round this year, right? Which, from a Canadian perspective, if we had the Battle of Alberta in round 2, that would be absolutely sensational. So the Flames are doing very well. Markstrom, by tonight's standard, he was excellent, and just in general has been very good. Vladar's been good too. So yeah, Calgary, they're legit. Number 5, dropping 1 spot from last week, the Boston Bruins. So the number 1 complaint usually is Shannon overrates the Boston Bruins. I think there's a lot of dislike for Boston. I know there's a lot of dislike for Boston. And I understand there's a lot of dislike for Boston. They do drop 1 spot this week. They had a pretty good week. They lose the game against Detroit, but they win the game against Tampa. So that win against Tampa was a pretty gutsy one. And considering they've been without Pasternak, and they're going to be without him again tomorrow, it's impressive to see them winning without Pasta, because he's considered to be their goal scorer. He is the guy who scores our goals. And we'll see if anybody else can do it. So the fact that Boston's holding their own, and it looks like they could finish in 3rd place. I think 2nd is gone. I think 3rd place is the best they can do. Yeah, Boston, I think, has been very good. I don't know what they do in the playoffs, because we have 3 Atlantic teams in the top 5, which is kind of ridiculous. But if they're out in the first round, that's okay. They've kind of achieved more this year than I probably expected. But we'll see how they round out the season. And and who they end up against, right? Because they could still end up in a wild card spot. So there's still a lot of places they could end up. Number 4, moving up one spot from last week. So they switched spots with Boston, and that's the New York Rangers. The Rangers just keep clicking. And the impressive thing with the Rangers is that even when Shesterkin's numbers are starting to look a little bit iffy, they're still finding ways to win. The Rangers are showing that they want this, that they could see that the division was within reach. Carolina's showing some weakness, so they're going out and they're trying to get the division, and they could win it. And that would be incredible if the New York Rangers won the Metro Division. I would be quite impressed with that. Now, I've said for the last 3 seasons now that I think the Rangers have a very good up-and-coming team, and I was surprised last year when they decided to clean house at the top, because this is a good team. And most of the pieces that are on this team right now are the same ones that were there when they cleaned house last year. But I digress. The Rangers, number 4 on the list. Number 3, moving up 5 spots from last week, one of the biggest movers, yes, the Toronto Maple Leafs. So here's the funny thing. Toronto fans get all angry, right, about being in the position they were in last week, which was 8th. While they're complaining on the Sunday, on the Monday, they're already up to 6th. And so this is kind of how it works, is that I was waiting for Toronto to have an excellent week. And they did this week. They had a fantastic week. And so Toronto ends up in 3rd. I was really impressed with how they played against Montreal tonight. That absolutely could have been a trap game. Now, this is the thing. The excitement right now in Toronto is it seems like it's at an all-time high. This division is still going to be exceedingly difficult to come out of in the playoffs. Now, if Toronto has home ice against Boston in the first round, I'm saying right now, I will pick Toronto to knock out Boston in the playoffs, because I think this year could be the year they finally do it. It's going to depend on Jack Campbell. It's going to depend on the guys making the big money actually showing up in those big games in the playoffs, which we talked about last year against Montreal having been a problem when they were up 3-1. They have to overcome those personal demons. But I get the excitement around Toronto. I understand. I totally understand why Leaf fans are so excited and they're so over the moon about the Leafs. I do have some concerns when it comes to the goaltending. I do have some concerns when it comes to the mental aspect of it. They have to show they've overcome that. And great teams will overcome it. And almost every great team in the time I've watched hockey has been questioned about their mental fortitude. The Detroit Red Wings before they won it. The Edmonton Oilers during Gretzky's era before they won it. Oh, they're not good enough. They're not tough enough. They don't play defense. They can't win a cup. And then they won a bunch. And it's something. Ovechkin, before he won that cup in 2018, there were plenty who said he just wasn't good enough for a team to win a cup with, and you can't build around him. And there was a point in time where I was making those statements with Ovechkin. So I get where Toronto's at. I get the excitement. I also get why people have doubts. Be very interesting to watch what they do from here. Number 2, same spot as last week, the Florida Panthers. So Florida, the way they won tonight against the Nashville Predators, that was really impressive. That was impressive because they won that game in a different way than they've been winning the other games. And Florida kind of is an 80s throwback to the really good 80s teams where they're down 6-2 and they come back and win 7-6 in overtime. But they can play different styles of hockey. And Florida can beat you in numerous ways. So again, Florida's going to be really interesting to watch in the playoffs because they have that same problem of not being able to get over the hump since 96. For the Leafs, it's 04. And so we'll see. Because once we get into the playoffs, it is quite possible the teams at the top of this board could be out. We've seen this many times over where we go through an 82-game season, you get to the end of it, and in the playoffs, it's a totally different beast, and teams that have walked through the regular season struggle in the postseason. I don't think Florida does this year, but I'm interested to find out. No spoilers either if you're a time traveler. Number 1, same as last week, Colorado. So Florida and Colorado are both on winning streaks right now because winning the President's Trophy isn't enough. They also want to set, point records for their franchises. For Colorado, honestly, I think they're full value for first right now. That's despite needing overtime to beat the Jets and then a shootout tonight to beat the Oilers. They're not blowing teams out every game, But again, much like Florida, they're finding different ways to win. If they'd lost that game tonight against Edmonton in the shootout, I think I would have had to switch them with Florida. Even though with Florida, I get concerned with the 6-2 trailing part of things in their games. The 7-6 wins are nice; they're fun to watch, but the 6-2 trailing's a problem. 5-1 too. For Colorado, they win in different manners. They have really good depth. Their blue line's fantastic. And anytime I hear somebody talk about Cale Makar and say, well, you have to be able to play defense and he's all offense, I realize I'm talking to somebody who's never watched Cale Makar play hockey. Watching that game against Edmonton tonight, I was watching every really good defensive play Makar was making, and he is fantastic defensively as he is offensively. The offense is great, 25 goals, but the defense is fantastic, and Darcy Kemper has been lights out for months. His numbers have been ridiculous for months now, and so we'll see if he ends up being a finalist for the Vezina. I think he kind of has to be. That result tonight against Edmonton, it's only a shootout victory because of Kemper. No way that if they had Francouz in net, they get a point in that game tonight. Edmonton would have probably won that game about 4-1. Anyways, there you go. You're all caught up in the power rankings. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. Just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.